Are we failing our kids by not teaching them about perception? Welcome to Hack Learning. It's what you can do tomorrow. I'm your host, Mark Barnes, and today we are uncut, and I appreciate all of our subscribers listening to Hack Learning Uncut. It means we do not provide show notes, and if you're here and you're not a subscriber, you may have landed here because someone shared it. We appreciate that sharing, and if you did stumble upon us, please go over to hacklearningpodcast.com and subscribe, and you will never miss an episode. In the open, I asked a question about perception. Recently, if you're listening when this is first published, you may remember that there is an event happened in Washington, D.C. not long ago. There were some protesters, there were some kids, and there was a viral message. And there were really two sides to this message. And one of those sides painted a student as someone who was up in someone else's face and had the word that was used often, I used it myself, was smug. He had a smug look. His friends were behind him. They were taking video. They were cheering. And it looked bad. He was up in the face of an elderly Native American who was protesting, and it didn't look good. And so a lot of people had that perception. This is a bad kid. There was their perception and the message they shared, and he's not being taught right, and the school should not have allowed this, and everything negative. Now, on the other side, there was the perception that the Native American started it, that he walked toward the kids, and that maybe he seemed intimidating, and that they're young and they didn't know what to do. The bottom line here is perception is something that can create problems for now and into the future. And I think this is something we need to be teaching our kids. Whether you looked at those videos and thought, this kid is smug, this kid's a jerk, this is a problem, or this kid should have never been in that situation. The adults failed him and his friends, and this other person precipitated all of this. If that's your perception, that's okay. The thing is, with the perception, it's everywhere. And what happens is people see the kid in a certain light, positive or negative, but he's getting labeled as something that he may or may not be. And I think what's lost in this conversation is this perception. And if we teach kids, there will be perception. And oftentimes it could be negative. And that negativity can impact you now and certainly in your future. Then I think we do them a great service with that lesson. In Hacking Digital Learning Strategies by Shelley Terrell, she takes us on EdTech missions. And a lot of what Shelley does is helps us to understand the impact of technology. Hacking Digital Learning Strategies is not a tech guide. It's not something that is designed to show you tools and say, here, go use this to teach that. It's more about technology and social media's impact on a grand scale, and also how we can use it to impact learning, but also the things that we need to be teaching that maybe we're not. And in one of the hacks in Hacking Digital Learning Strategies focuses on fake news. And I know we're talking about perception, but I think that this is a really important piece. And I want to share some of this and make some connections between the perception that happens on social media along with what is real or what is fake, and how we can teach about this in a way that will really help our kids in the future. In the What You Can Do Tomorrow section, typically in Hack Learning, in this book we call it Mission Prep, and it's that stuff you can do right away to help. Shelley says, our digital learners need insight into the important processes that professional news agencies, crews, reporters, and journalists undergo to ensure they report the news accurately. The following activities introduce learners to interviewing skills, fact-checking, and the general layout of a broadcast. Now, again, we're talking about perception. When I share with you what Shelley says we can do as educators, and even as parents or anyone else who influences kids, that these things will also help with perception. And I think that's a piece of the conversation. We want to share with them, think about fake news, think about the things you do. And as we're doing these activities, how does this impact perception? Here's what Shelley says. Fact-check news stories. Open browsers to one of the following fact-checking websites: Snopes, Fact Check, or PolitiFact. Demonstrate how students can quickly verify facts using the search engines on these websites. Next, present a news article with faulty reporting to your students. Instruct them to identify key facts, statistics, and claims in the article. Then verify them using the fact-checking website. Imagine if you weave into this lesson something about perception, where you talk about perception and say, when someone opens an article, when someone sees a share on a social channel of an article, and we know people who share them annotate. They say their opinions often or something about the article, and then they link to it. So already we have an idea. We have a perception before we even open it. And oftentimes, when something is shared on a social channel by someone we're connected to, we tend to, I think it's human nature, we tend to almost immediately default to this must be the real thing. And we don't pause and say, is this accurate and should we check it out? So our perception of the topic can be jaded right away. So when we teach kids about fact-checking, I think we also want to talk about perception. And in Shelley's next tip in this mission prep in Hacking Digital Learning Strategies, she says, analyze the real dangers of spreading fake news. Now, I think here's where perception comes in. Shelley says, often students click, like, or repost news without a vetting process. They don't realize this contributes to the spread of fake news because what they like appears in the feeds of their friends and followers. Investigate the dangers of the massive spread of mistruths by analyzing how fake news impacted the 2016 presidential elections, led to violence at a Washington pizza place, Pizzagate, and led to nuclear threats on Israel by Pakistan's then defense minister, and other things. Present one of these events to your students to research the fake news resource, the contributors to the false reporting, and the harmful results. And that is something I want us to focus on. Think of the harmful results. Let me go back to the anecdote I shared in the beginning of this episode about the protest in D.C., the people on both sides, and the perceptions that were out there because of how this was shared. And there were all kinds of different angles and news and commentary that influence our perception. And what concerns me is when we're talking about kids, they have futures, right? We hope they have rich futures. But what happens in today's world, in social media, in the viral nature of things, our kids can be damaged. And they're going to be looked at for college admissions, for job applications, by people in general. And they're going to be judged. And those judgments will often be based on perceptions that someone sees on social media, in video, in news, whether that news is fake or real. We need to explain this to our kids. I think Hacking Digital Learning Strategies by Shelley Terrell is a marvelous resource that will help all adults, educators, parents understand the impact of the tools we have at our fingertips and that our kids have, and how to use them for good. And more important, we need to teach them about perception. Let's show them these things and say, people will have perceptions. People will judge you, whether right or wrong, based on what they see and how it is shared. We need to really be careful with what we do and what we say, and especially we need to take a moment of pause when the lights are on, and we need to tell our students and our kids that in today's world, those lights are always on. Thank you for listening. Check out more from Hack Learning at hacklearningpodcast.com and review our books at hacklearningbooks.com.